Welcome you all. My name is Doug Casey, and I serve as the Commission for Educational Technologies Executive Director. We've got some updates today to share with you. We've got some slides that we're pulling up, and excited to share updates both on the state's digital equity plan as well as probably the reason why everybody's attending today, which is to learn more about this exciting digital equity competitive grant program. So with that, I would like to hand things over to Mark Raymond, who's the state Chief Information Officer and chairs the Connecticut Commission for Educational Technology. And Mark has been a long-term champion of digital equity in various forms. So, Mark, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Doug, and thanks everyone for being here. As Doug said, my name is Mark Raymond. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the state of Connecticut. Digital equity has been a part of the mission for the state of Connecticut for a long time. We haven't always used the term digital equity, but if you look at the works of the Commission for Educational Technology, the Connecticut Education Network, the Deep Broadband Office, OPM, DAS, the Governor's Office, many other agencies, they all support the idea that skills and access to digital tools really can help enrich the lives of our constituents. So as a personal driver of the digital government effort here at the state of Connecticut, I know that our efforts in technology are more successful when everyone can use them, not just some. So I do appreciate you all being here today, and I appreciate the efforts of our partners at the NTIA, who's helping to enable the state's efforts in many different programs, including the BEAD effort, including a digital equity capacity grant, and now the digital equity competitive grant, in which you're about to hear today. So thanks for being a part of the community that it takes to help us really get this last mile of skills and access completed. So appreciate the time today, and I'm glad that you're all able to be here. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Mark. Well, speaking of our partners at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, I would like to hand things over to our partner in this work from the federal government. The NTIA is part of the Department of Commerce, and Graham has been our guide by the side throughout the process of developing our state digital equity plan, and he's here to share a bit about the competitive grant program. But I know Graham is going to give some high-level context to how all these digital equity programs weave together. So, Graham, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Again, my name is Graham Fishel. I'm with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA for short, which is a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we work with our friends, Doug and Lauren, with the Department of Administration Services in order to execute some of the digital equity programs that we've launched so far and will be launching soon. So the Digital Equity Act is actually part of a larger package of bills, the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed in November of 2021. And within the Digital Equity Act, there's three programs: the state planning grant, which we awarded to about $650,000 to the state of Connecticut in December or November of 2022. And they used that to develop a state digital equity plan, which is very well done. The next grant is the state capacity grant, which Doug's team just applied for and is working its way through the review process now. that is at this basic level is designed to help address many of the barriers that Doug and his team identified as part of the state digital equity plan. In the last grant program we have here is $1.25 billion in total. And that will help complement the state's efforts in that they are addressing in the capacity grant, but is open to a wider range of grantees, which is maybe the reason that you're here today. And at its basic level, and Mark talked about this a little bit, but it's really trying to develop and implement the state digital equity plans. And so I think the first step, and I'll probably say this a couple more times today, is if you haven't already, please look at the state digital equity plan that Doug and his team have put together. That will help inform and guide your applications if you choose to apply for the digital equity competitive grant program here. But looking to implement the digital equity plan, to provide digital literacy and digital skills education, and facilitate the adoption of high-speed internet. And you can kind of see the timeline here. We're in the middle of the end of 2024. There's been a lot of work that's happened up to this point. But the competitive NOFO or program rules launched about 3 weeks ago, and that's probably why you all are here today. So with that, Doug, you want to move on to the next slide here, or if I'm turning over to somebody else?
Yeah, I think I'll take it from here, Graham. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And Graham will be back in a few minutes. I wanted to spend a little bit of time here offering some context to, Graham sort of gave that 50,000-foot view of how these different programs work together. I did want to spend a few minutes talking about the state's digital equity plan. As Graham mentioned, there was a planning phase, and that planning phase produced 50 state digital equity plans. Connecticut has one. It's available at ct.gov/digital equity. We'll provide plenty of links and resources at the end of the presentation, but wanted to kind of guide you through that. Before we do, though, I wanted to maybe provide a little bit of expand on some of what Mark had referred to earlier. The state's Commission for Educational Technology is part of the Department of Administrative Services. We've been around for about 25 years, and digital equity is in our blood, in our mission, whether it is launching and sustaining a flagship state research and education network, or putting together resources to help communities get people connected, helping students connect and continue learning during the pandemic. Digital equity is not a new concept to us. It's something that we've been advocating for years, and the reason why the Commission's leading this work on behalf of Connecticut. Prior to this work, the state had already established some guidance and standards regarding digital equity, and so within Connecticut state statute, there is a definition of what digital equity is. It's on the screen, and it's pretty simple, pretty high level, but the basic concept is we want to make sure that every single resident has access to devices, connections, and really one of the most challenging parts of this is the skills and support to use technology effectively to flourish in learning, work, healthcare, overall wellness, social well-being. So that is what digital equity in a nutshell is about. Talking specifically about these federal programs, our state digital equity program, our state digital equity plan rather, is concerned with all residents, but especially the covered populations that you see on the screen here. And again, the language that we're using is straight from federal guidance. So I won't go through all these, but if you think about those who are living at or below the poverty line, folks who are aging, veterans, et cetera, if you combine all those populations, that's not some small subset of everybody who lives in Connecticut. It's the vast majority of residents. So while there's a priority for these covered populations, when you look at this as a total footprint of residents who that we're prioritizing, it is almost the vast majority of Connecticut. The outcomes that you see on the screen too are general, but important to keep in the back of our minds. This is the why we do digital equity. We are really focused on not just connections, boxes, and wires, but skill development and support for the outcomes that you see on the screen, whether it's education or workforce development, civic engagement, especially as we are in another election year. It's extremely important that people are well informed and engaged, and digital tools can help with that. So the what digital equity includes, as I mentioned earlier, its availability and affordability of internet access. We are already a very technology-rich state, and yet we still don't see adoption levels that you would expect from that level of access. So that's one of the key initiatives that we have in our plan. Digital literacy with a specific focus on cybersecurity and folks being aware of and being able to manage their own digital footprint and privacy. Technical support is another priority, and then access to public resources. A good example of this would be the work that we and many other state agencies, virtually every state agency, is working on to make sure that we can make services available digitally to empower residents to have the agency they need to do what they need to do without having to stand in line or go somewhere. So those are the components that we have in our plan. Wanted to take you briefly through. This slide is really important. There's a lot going on here, and you can read this in detail, but this is the result of a year's worth of research that we conducted last year in conducting focus groups. We surveyed more than 7,000 residents. We did a lot of deep dives into existing data sets from the census, et cetera, and we created what are called benchmarks for digital equity. And so we've looked at a digital connection benchmark, which means that you've got a smartphone and a computer, as well as a high-speed internet connection. A digital literacy benchmark, and that means that you can use technology effectively for learning and work and personal finances, engaging in telehealth, et cetera. You've got those skills to really use technology effectively. And then a digital security benchmark. So you're aware of and have the skills to protect your data and be an effective steward of your personal profile and data while you're online. So again, this is broken down by those cover populations that I mentioned earlier, and so this is worth a look, not just out of curiosity, but as you're thinking about your competitive grant. These are the populations, and these are the sort of the gaps that you can see as you consider serving these folks. The digital divide, in a sense, is quantified for Connecticut on this slide. Our state digital equity plan includes 6 core components. We want to promote skills and technical support. We want to raise public awareness of existing resources. We don't claim to have everything planned out and included in our state digital equity plan. We recognize that there are some wonderful programs that exist already, and there will continue to be other programs that emerge over the years to come. Our goal is to simply help connect residents to those resources. We want to make sure that there are affordable options for people to get online. Availability of technology is not the end. It's affordability and availability. We want to make sure that digital government continues to be a flagship example of accessibility and engagement. We want to support the work that our colleagues are doing, especially within DEEP, through the BEAD program to make broadband both available and affordable, and then creating some communities of practice to foster ongoing learning about digital equity best practices. The specific projects that we have, and again, I want to reinforce that this competitive grant program is intended to complement and support our state digital equity plan. So as you think about potential proposals that you might want to request funding for through the competitive grant, think about the things that would complement and not overlap what you see on the screen. So real briefly, we have in our scope over the next few years that we will create some short-term pilots that we can have some immediate impact as well as learn a lot from. We will be launching a sub-grant program. Pending approval of our capacity grant application, we'll be launching a sub-grant program, most likely in early 2025. So that's another opportunity to apply for funding. In thinking about proposals for funding that would support your work in helping people both get online and develop the skills that they need to flourish online. We'll be developing a common skills curriculum so that both those who are funded through these programs as well as any organization can leverage this curriculum so they can get a baseline and help to roll out training programs for skill development. And then also importantly, launching a statewide digital equity asset map. As I mentioned earlier, we don't claim to run or oversee every digital equity program in the state, but we really want to be those facilitators and indexers of all the great resources that are out there toward the goal of anyone, regardless of where they live, can easily find resources to get online and get skilled. So those are the projects that we have planned pending approval of our capacity grant application. In terms of timing, we expect to receive our awards sometime in September, as in next month. The short-term pilots we'll be looking to ramp up in the fourth quarter of this year. We will be launching collaboratives, communities of practice. So regardless of where you live, if you are a digital equity advocate or program administrator, or just want to learn more, you will have a place to go and engage with colleagues from your region. And then finally, and again, this is not all of the steps for our 5-year plan, but just some of the immediate next steps. In the first quarter of next year, we expect to have more information and applications up for that sub-grant program that I mentioned. So just as a reminder, before I hand things back over to Graham, the opportunities that we see with regard to the state digital equity plan are areas that don't duplicate the work that we already are receiving funding for. And those could include, and again, this is not prescriptive, but some of the things that we have not specifically earmarked for would be device donations and distribution. We could quickly spend down all the expected award funds on buying computers for everybody, and we don't think that would be a long-term sustainable goal to invest those monies in. But we do encourage nonprofit organizations and other kinds of organizations to be thinking about how they could create pathways to making devices more affordable to residents. The other area that has come up to, which we see as a need, more infrastructure focused, is public computer facilities. So thinking about refurbishing or expanding access to public computers. So a couple of examples. Again, I want to reinforce these are not prescriptive. If you have other great ideas, by all means, I think those are fair game too. But before I take up any more time, I want to hand things over to Graham. Hopefully this context has been helpful. And Graham will be able to take you through what you came here for, which is learn more about this competitive grant. So Graham, back to you, and I'll get you to the first slide of yours.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. And yeah, I'll be providing just a very high level, very basic overview of the competitive grant program. Before I get started, I'm going to put a plug in for our website, internetforall.gov. And it has all sorts of different pieces of information on there, one-pagers, slides, webinars, everything I'm going to cover here in about 5 to 10 minutes. We have like a full hour-long webinar on. So if you have a yearning to earn more, I'll put a plug in for this at the end too. But just internetforall.gov, great website that has lots of resources on the competitive grant. So like I was saying earlier, the competitive grant program is really the third or the last digital equity funding opportunity that's authorized by the Digital Equity Act. So we talked about the state planning grant, and then Doug just talked about the state capacity grant that they just submitted for, and this is the competitive grant. And it's open to entities such as political subdivisions, nonprofits, community and institutions, local educational agencies. I think it's all a question to chat about if schools would be eligible. So this would be, your local education agencies are eligible for this, workforce development organizations, and so on. So the first two grants were specifically geared towards the state as director recipients, and this is geared towards other, obviously states, certain state entities would be eligible, but this is also geared towards nonprofits and other organizations as well. Next up. Talked about this earlier, but bears reinforcing though, because it's a really critical component. The competitive grant program is really seeking to serve the covered populations that are defined in U.S. code as part of the Digital Equity Act. So those individuals that live in covered households, so in low-income households, aging individuals, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with language barriers, and individuals part of the racial or ethnic minority group, and individuals who reside in a rural area. And I know there's probably maybe folks that wouldn't think that there's any rural areas in Connecticut, but I think rural areas are defined in the program rules, or the NOFO as we call it, as any town that's less than 50,000 people. So there might be some places out there that apply that fit the rural area definition there. Next slide. And the purpose of the competitive grant program is really to, achieve digital equity by promoting, digital inclusion activities and spur the greater adoption of broadband amongst covered populations. As a quick aside, one of the other big broadband programs that we administer is the BEAD program, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment, and that's about a $50 billion infrastructure program. And the thought process, I think, when Congress was writing this bill was, if we built the $50 billion worth of broadband infrastructure, we want to make sure that we are funding the inclusion and adoption activities to make sure that everyone can benefit from this infrastructure. So part of the goals are accessing quality education, access to healthcare, increasing social and civic engagement, improving economic stability, and furthering workforce development opportunities, and just the general community access benefits of adopting broadband technology. Next slide. We're really looking for, and I've said this a couple of times, and it bears repeating, applications for programs and activities that address gaps in the implementation of the state digital equity plans. So I've said this before. I think the first thing you should do if you're interested in applying for this grant is go to Doug's website, read their state digital equity plan, because we are looking for programs that will supplement and further advance state digital equity plans. I think that's really important. We want to make sure that you are proposing activities that address barriers outlined in that plan. And we're looking for partnerships. I listed a lot of organizations that were eligible before, but even if you're not one of those eligible organizations, you're maybe representing a different organization. We are encouraging partnerships. So maybe there is a eligible entity that you would like to partner with to apply for some of these eligible activities. And Doug. So again, worth bearing repeating, political subdivisions would be eligible, foundations, corporations, community institutions, local education agencies, entities that carry out workforce development programs, and a partnership, again, maybe most importantly, the partnership between any of the entities described above. Here are some of the allowable activities of the grant program. This is pretty important, but so digital inclusion activities that benefit one or more of the covered populations, facilitation of broadband by covered populations, furthering broadband adoption, upgrading public access centers or places, community acquisitions, or places that that individuals or covered population individuals from the covered populations may go to access broadband services, training programs for covered populations to advance digital skills and other workforce development programs, and then equipment, instrumentation, networking capabilities for the covered populations. So those are all some of the allowable activities as part of the grant program. So this is pretty important. We are estimating or anticipating that the range of award amounts be between about 5 million to 12 million. If you are seeking or submitting an application that is less or more than that, we're just going to ask you maybe some additional questions about why that is, but those are the anticipated award amounts at the range of 5 million to 12 million. I also want to keep in mind that we are going to try to, of the 1.25 billion, we're going to try to get a lot of that out the door in this funding round. But there may be additional funding rounds of the competitive grant and future, what we call NOFOs or rounds of funding in the future. So between $5 and $12 million award amounts. One thing that's really important is that we're going to require the program measurement, performance measurement and evaluation. And how you might be covering or improving the societal economic goals of the covered populations. And we want to we're going to require analysis of the program effectiveness. And so here, kind of explaining some of the different program performance measurements and evaluations. A lot of in the digital equity plan, Doug and his team outline a lot of the baseline measurements. So again, I would go back and maybe refer to that as a starting point, or maybe for some inspiration on how you want to measure and evaluate your program effectiveness. Again, we're going to be looking for applicants to review the state digital equity plans. I just said that for economic metrics. I got ahead of myself, but we want to make sure you're clearly identifying the covered populations that they're being served by any programs or that you are proposing, and the total number of individuals being served. And then some anecdotal experiences. So collecting and reporting testimonies that demonstrate the positive experiences generated to the program. So there's both some qualitative and quantitative metrics that you'll want to include in your evaluation. So again, I'm going to put a plug in for our website, internetforall.gov. But to actually apply for the grant, you're going to try to access our grants portal. So grants.ntia.gov. The grants portal opened today. So if you go to that website that's linked here, you will be able to find that. Portal. So that portal will have all the information you need, and that's how you, in fact, apply for that grant program. And the application portal is available. It's open now. Last slide here. Yeah. So again, I've said this a couple of times during this presentation, but review the NOFO on our website. For those of you who don't know, that NOFO is Notice of Funding Opportunity, and it includes all the relevant program guidelines and eligibility criteria. Register for SAM.gov, so it's a grants clearinghouse. Make sure you have a up-to-date SAM.gov registration. Identify your partnerships and to your stakeholders. 6, I've said this a couple of times, to review the DE, Connecticut's state-specific DE plan. Review all the application guidance on our website, and prepare and submit your application. So those are a couple next steps. And then lastly, here are some really key dates to remember. Applications are due on September 23rd, 2024. The applications for the U.S. territory set aside as October is not till October, but don't worry about that. Focus on the September 23rd, 2024 date. That is the application deadline. And we anticipate notifying successful applicants this winter. The period of performance, so the measurement and evaluation activities we anticipate that will be 4 years after the date in which your grant would be awarded. So 4-year period of performance for the grant, but September 23rd is the last date to apply for the grant. Before I turn it back over to Doug, most important things, go to our website. Everything I covered here, there's all the slides from this slide deck. There is a webinar from Angie, who heads the DE programs at NTIA. She does an hour-long webinar on this topic, and provides a lot more context than I just did. I did a very basic overview. And it's very well done. There's one-pagers, there's different FAQs that are on the website. So please go check that out. And then please again read the Connecticut State Digital Equity Plan. That will be a useful guide as you prepare potential projects. And again, because we want applicants, their applications to fit into that State Digital Equity Plan. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Doug.
Thank you, Graham. This was really helpful to spin through the slides and get a sense of those, the scope and timing. Just as a reminder, we've been dropping some links into the chat, but to provide those sort of top of mind and in your hands. So as Graham mentioned, internetforall.gov is your one-stop shop for all digital equity program materials. Specifically, that longer URL on the slide here will take you right to the Digital Equity Act, and then you can just click on the competitive grant. As mentioned before, the Commission is not overseeing the competitive grant program, really here just as hosts, and hopefully connect the Connecticut community more directly with Graham and the NTIA and the technical guidance there. That said, I would highly recommend a very, very close read of the Notice of Funding Opportunity. That is your definitive go-to for the sort of scope and timing of the application if you're considering it. There are recorded presentations already at the website listed here, in addition to slides and some really great technical guidance. The NTIA as an agency, and Graham especially, have been phenomenal supports for our work here in Connecticut, and continually posting FAQs and other technical resources that are extremely valuable. When it comes to Connecticut's Digital Equity Plan, as I mentioned earlier and dropped into the chat, it's pretty simple. It's ct.gov/digital equity, and you can read both a brief executive summary of our multi-year digital equity strategic plan, as well as the full-blown 300 pages of research and detailed steps and plans. We plan to continue posting updates to that page through the coming years, and so I invite you to go back there as well. Speaking of the Digital Equity Plan and Digital Equity team, I just want to take a moment and thank Lauren Thompson, who's our Digital Equity Program Manager for Connecticut. She has been the leader behind this work, and really brings so much insight, and her whole career as in the library field. Speaking of which, libraries are also huge champions of digital equity. So Lauren, thank you for making all this happen for Connecticut. And no longer with us on our team, moved on to other pastures, but I also wanted to thank Sarah Eula Minnick, who, if you look through the digital equity plan, her work is all over that too. So we have a small but mighty team here, and here to answer any questions about the state's digital equity plan. But with that, I know there are some questions in the chat. We will we'll stay on for the rest of the hour for any questions that that may come up. But with that, I let's see, Lauren. I don't know if there are questions that we have not answered so far. Just looking in the chat, I know there Nicole had a question a while back about municipalities looking to build, own, and operate an open access network that would offer service to every address in their community. Graham, I don't know if you can see that question. I don't know if you are comfortable answering that one, but it seems a bit like a BEAD question.
Yeah, this activity as you describe it, Nicole, probably wouldn't be a great fit for the digital equity competitive grant program. I would probably reach out to your colleagues at the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, DEEP, who are administering your BEAD program. And they are about to run their subgrantee selection for the BEAD program, which is more of a deployment program. And you may be eligible for an activity through that. But that's what I would recommend to you.
And to make it a little bit easier to find, our colleagues at DEEP just dropped a link into their work around broadband deployment.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, great.
And we can, although it's been quiet from our participants, just because by default we've got mics turned off. If you'd like to raise your hand and ask a question, we welcome to hear your voice too. So,
if you want to start, we can start with David Ferreira.
Perfect. If we can unmute.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I just need to unmute. Yep. So the only quick question is, when I looked at the NOFO, any areas as far as page count, word limit, or anything in regards to the executive summary narrative, I didn't necessarily see that over in the NOFO.
Sorry, could you repeat that? You're looking for a word limit for your...
Yeah. Is there anything in regards to word limit or word count or page limit in regards to the proposals? I didn't necessarily see that in the NOFO.
It probably wouldn't be in the NOFO. It might be in the grants portal. Sometimes we have some character limits in the grants portal, but the grants portal, if you go to the grants portal, that might answer that. And I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head. I apologize.
All right, no problem. I'll check the grants portal. Thank you.
Next up, we have an Ann Harrison.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I am one of the people who could not put in the chat, but we are a nonprofit workforce development board. I represent Workforce Alliance based in New Haven. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a bit about eligible or any other workforce development programs or skills that would be of particular interest for this.
Doug, I can start and say that, as a workforce development entity, you would be eligible for the grant as an eligible entity. I think that for your application, you would want to any activities that are or that you perform around workforce specific to that serve covered populations. especially with maybe digital skills. And so that's probably the great starting place. But I think I would make sure I would start with, what services do you offer that increase broadband access or skills specifically to the covered populations would be maybe a good way to start. I don't know, Doug, if you want to add anything to that, but it's pretty open-ended. I mean, we don't prescribe necessarily what kind of workforce development activity, as long as it's increasing digital access and skills to the covered populations.
Okay.
I would just echo what you said, Graham, and do take a close look at the state's digital equity plan. In a nutshell, I would think about the digital equity work is not heavily focused on broadband. It's certainly not focused on broadband expansion, although we support that. The work of DEEP, that's really their wheelhouse. I would be focusing much more on, as Graham directed, toward the skill development and support of residents. It's where one of the biggest gaps that we see in the research that we've done and the emphasis that we've placed on the state's digital equity plan, and probably would want to see work that complements that through the capacity applications. But I will say, not but, and a big and, the workforce boards are huge potential partners with all this work. You're already working very closely with the residents that we serve, so that it makes a lot of sense.
Great, thank you so much.
Next in the chat, we have a message from Amy Casavina Hall. I see there is a 10% minimum matching requirement, federal funds not eligible, with increasing matching percentages, adding points to applications. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. I think we're in this situation. So I don't know if your question is centered around the federal funds not being eligible. We get a lot of questions about if ARPA dollars would be eligible for matching dollars, which in this case, I don't believe they are. So so as you're putting together your applications, we're also looking for folks that are going to be providing or unlocking additional match. So the higher that your match, you can get additional points in your application. So if you're able to partner with other entities that can increase your match, that'll make your application a little bit more attractive. I'm not sure if I've answered your question at all, but great.
That is
not to shut down the conversation, but I did want to reiterate in the chat. I'm going to drop that in early and often, right? That link to the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program. As Graham said, there are a ton of resources there. There's an excellent overview primer on the program. So if you come up with a question 5 minutes after we close today, chances are there's an answer to it already in those resources there.
And Doug, one thing I should, going back to Amy's question, one thing I would be remiss if I didn't add, I just realized this, but in-kind contribution, in-kind matches count towards your match. So keep that in mind as well. But match can take place as both dollars and financial and in-kind contributions.
okay. We do have a new question in the chat from Tesha Tramontano Kelly. Does a match mean having other funding to support the programs we are applying for?
Yeah, so that would mean whatever the non-NTIA share of the total cost is. That's what a match means.
A lot of educators on the call, and we know what proper wait time means. But I think things are getting quiet. Hopefully, we've answered all the questions. I don't see any more hands raised or chats. So yeah, we appreciate everybody spending some time this morning learning a little bit more about both the state digital equity plan as well as the federal competitive grant program. I want to thank Graham again for his time joining us from sunny Indianapolis, and Mark for opening us up and for your leadership at the commission and the state. Lauren, again, thank you for leading this program. And for everyone who's joining us this morning, I wish you the best of luck in considering whether you might want to apply moving forward. We really look at digital equity as a whole of state effort. There are so many important initiatives already taking place to close the digital divide and make sure that our residents are as equipped to use technology and flourish in this digital world we live in. So we thank you for your leadership, everybody on this call, and wish you a great rest of the day.